Hey everyone, this is Candace from Crafters United and Crafters Against COVID-19, and I'm here today to tell you how to make our new Butterfly Kids mask. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make one mask, but I'm going to give you tips throughout the video on how you can make a whole batch faster. You're going to need a printer in order to print out the pattern. The pattern has a 2-inch scale on it, so make sure that you check your scale once you have it printed and that you are at 2 inches. And then you're going to pick your pattern based on the size of your kid. And of course, if you're making them for a batch, then you're not going to know which kids are wearing them. So just make half and half. Unless we specifically requested for you to make a specific size, just make half and half. The supplies that you're going to need for the kids' smaller mask, you're going to need 2 pieces of tightly woven cotton fabric. So that's like your basic quilter's cotton fabric. It is important that this is woven and not knit fabric, and that it is flat cotton. Flannel is not going to work for this. And those 2 pieces for the smaller kids' masks are going to be 6.5 by 9. And for the larger kids' masks, they're going to be 7.5 by 10. So you need those 2 pieces of cotton. You can choose if they match or don't match. For this demonstration, I'm going to use 2 pieces that don't match so that it's easier to see the inside and the outside of the mask. And then in addition to that, you're going to need a piece of wire. That wire should be 3 inches wide at least. And then you're going to need some kind of attachment to the head. The primary way that I have been doing it when I've been making these masks is with elastic. I also am going to show you how to make it out of ties. And for the ties, you're going to want to get something like a stretch fabric that has at least a little bit of horizontal stretch across the fabric. Just cut that fabric into about 1 inch and then stretch it out, and it's going to roll just like this is rolled. So this is actually, if I unroll it, 1 inch wide piece of fabric, right? But you can see that it's rolled up and it kind of has made a cord. You can also use actual cording if you have cording, shoelaces. You can make your own ties out of bias or out of just a tube of fabric. They don't need to be on the bias. And that's it. That's what you need to get started. We're going to go into the machine and sew this diagonal corner edges and the top edge together. Make sure your machine is set at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you're going to start and stop your stitch with back stitching. When you get to the corner, you're going to raise your foot in order to pivot your machine. Now, if you're making a second mask, you're going to raise your needle, raise your foot, get this one out of the way a little bit, and start on the next top edge seam right away. If you're making just one mask, then you're going to go ahead and take it out and do the bottom edge exactly the same way that you just did the top. And if you're doing multiple masks right now, you'll be doing those bottom edges once again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row until you do your whole amount of masks. Next step, we're going to take this piece that we've made and we're going to turn it right way out and press it. So get those corners all the way out to the edge by pushing your finger in there until you can kind of see the stitching right along there. And then while you're pressing it, go ahead and push these edges so that you don't lose any of that diagonal. That's really important for making the casing when we add the head attachment. Now that we've got our mask all right way out and pressed, we can go ahead and start marking it for our nose wire. So fold your mask in half, and that's going to find the center for you, and then you're going to measure 1.5 inches from that fold in. And that's going to give you a 3-inch measurement measured on both sides. So now that we've made our little marker, we can hold up our wire to it and you'll see it's going to fit right into that opening. So we're going to start with a right off of the edge of this fold, right before we are on the edge. We're going to start with our needle there. We're going to come over the edge and down about 3 or 4 stitches, and then you're going to back stitch that whole section, and then you're going to pivot there and kind of making like a very long L here. You're going to continue from here along until you get to this marker, and you're going to back stitch again. Keep the needle down again like we did before when we pivoted, and pivot. So you should be sewing now parallel with the finished edge of the top of your mask. Now I've made it to the pin. I'm going to get that pin out of my way and then do the back stitching there. Then we'll take it out of the machine. If you're making 25, just go ahead and do this on all 25 masks in a row. And then you're going to open up this end right here, and you're going to feed that wire into the pocket that we've just made. And just be careful that you don't get caught on your seam allowance in there. There are a couple of layers, but it shouldn't be too hard to get the wire into there. You want to get it into it until it's touching the end here. And then make sure that your stitching has made it all the way to there. And then you can go into the machine and back stitch right over this. We're going to try to catch, just barely catch that stitch right there, just to lock everything together so we don't have any little sneaky ways for that wire to break free. So you can see here, now we have a completely closed pocket, and you can see what I mean about just letting yourself overlap that stitch just a little bit. So for our next step, we're going to go ahead and start making this mask 3-dimensional. And to do that, we're going to use our pattern. Go ahead and line up those finished edges of your mask with the dashed line on the pattern. Whatever you want the outside fabric to be, you want that to be face down. So we'll do it this way. So we're going to make what I like to call a little mask crepe. So it looks kind of like a little crepe. So we fold it up along that dashed inner line, and then we fold it down at the top again along the dashed inner line, and then right where those two overlap each other, there's a little lip where they overlap each other. We're going to go ahead and throw a pin in the middle there just to hold it together while we do our stitching. Our next goal is to get these stitched right along the edge on the top and bottom that we made here with our folds. So again, if you're making a quantity of these, at this point you want to just raise the foot and slide the next piece into it, just going along that top edge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next step for the rest of us is to just go ahead and do the same thing on the opposite side. So you can see here how that stitching is very close to that edge. So now we've got our little crepe all sewn. You can take the pin out of there. Okay, so for this next step, we're going to add the pleats in here. These pleats are a little different than what we're used to, and so I want to show you with the aid of a pin. This is the wrong side of the mask, the inside. Once it's flipped open, that will be the inside of the mask. That fold stitching that we just did in the last step goes on the outside of the mask. So let me just show you this. This is that point that we created when we did that corner angle seam and the top edge seam, this point right here. So I'm just marking that point. You don't need to do that, but I'm marking that point so that you can see how I'm folding this mask. So if you were to fold it in half, it would just be flat and it wouldn't give you a 3-dimensional shape. But if we pivot that point up to this edge so that we make kind of an equal triangle here, we get a 3-dimensional shape. Now I'm going to pin all 4 sides so that you can see how this works. See how that makes it flip into a 3-dimensional shape, then a little nose Little child's nose can go up into that little pocket that we are creating with this. So same thing on the bottom. Now you see what you've got here. This is very three-dimensional. This is where the face is going to go into it. These two sides are going to become our casing. So now we're going to do tacks over where these pins are. And go ahead and trim all these extra threads off of it. Here's what your mask should look like. So this is the inside of the mask. That's the top where the nose wire is. You can see our 1, 2, 3, 4 tacks in these corners. And then we have still a raw edge on the ends here. This is what's going to become the casing. So you have two choices about how you want to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do it around the elastic because that's easier for me. If you want to make your casing and then feed your elastic or your head tie or whatever you're working with through it, that is totally fine. But you're making a casing on the side here. So you're going to double turn it like this and line it up with that edge of those little pleats that we just made. So once again, let me show you that. Fold it once, fold it twice, and it should line just about up with that finished edge on the little pleats that we made up there. If you're doing it with elastic inside of it right away, the trick is to kind of get it down there and pinch it together and then move your elastic so you can feel it go back against the outside fold, so that you can stitch along the inside fold without catching the elastic. See how it pulls? You can still pull it through. Be careful not to pull it all the way out. You'll have to thread it yourself, but our next step will be to stitch right along this line. And then we'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, and there we go. So let's clip all these threads off of here. And then for our very last step, we're going to go ahead and put a knot at the end of these elastics. And that's it. So here's a kid's mask for us to distribute to somebody in need. I so look forward to seeing all of these from you. I know that they're just going to be great and they make a big difference for the kids receiving them. So thank you so much for all your donations of time and energy and masks. We really appreciate you, and thanks for being part of the project.